So now I'm thinking, why don't we come back and we're going to adjust all H2s. So I'm going to select H2. And on the Mac, I can do a quick search and replace by pressing Control Command G. And we're going to change all of those occurrences to H3. And then right up here, I will make just this section an H2. And that way, I'm not receiving that styling. And then I can come back here and adjust things. So now we're only targeting H3s with that text. And now these will stay the same, but this is reduced to whatever is set by default. We'll scroll down a little bit more and see if there's anything else we need to change. And while I'm thinking of it, let's go ahead and get rid of those background colors that we set right here, because we don't need those anymore. We know what we're doing. Okay, so now let's specify the colors. So within here, banner H2, the color is going to be white. The font size is set to 28 pixels. That looks a lot better. And now we know we don't want the width to be too high. As you can see here, he doesn't even have the font set to bold, and he is using a special font. So if you needed to, you could also use a custom font, or you could use a background image. It's just up to you. I like to use as much HTML as when possible, but generally you may want to use a custom font. And you can look at Font Squirrel or Google Fonts for that. So for now, we're going to specify a maximum width for this section. And we can see it's roughly around 400 pixels. So I will add that in, 400. And that means anything that exceeds that width has to drop to a new line. Next, I'm going to reduce the font weight to normal. And that means no bold, just normal font weight. The next step is this should be placed at the very bottom. So we can position it absolutely. However, remember, if we say top 0, left 0, unless we have a positioning context, that's going to be all the way up here. Let's try it out. Nope, it's right up here. I was wrong because we have positioned the container. Now I'm going to position the banner because I want to set a new positioning context. There we go. Now we specify bottom to 0. There we go. And next, he does have a little bit of spacing from the left edge. Let's see what it is. 8 pixels, and he has a background color, but it's not just any background color, it's transparent. So we need to figure out how to do that. One step at a time, left of 8 pixels. That's pushed it away. And now I'm going to try to apply a background color of black. But there's a couple of things that aren't right. The first one is it looks like there's a little bit of spacing between each line. So we may need to play around with this. First, let's try to take care of the transparent background. Rather than setting a solid color, we can use a RGB for red, green, and blue. But then there's also an optional fourth parameter that most modern browsers take advantage of these days, and that's called alpha, or transparency. If we want to specify black, you can either memorize it or go here, choose black, and then you can see RGB is 000. Alternatively, white will be the opposite at 255, 255, 255. So we'll do 0 for red, 0 for green, 0 for blue, and the alpha. So let's set it to 1, which would be fully visible, or 0.5. And that's going to be a little bit transparent. Can you see how that's come down? Next, I want to push that a little closer to the bottom. So why don't we set bottom to -10 pixels? You can always play around with this. And then if I zoom in a few clicks, that text is right up against the edge of the background. Let's give it some more breathing room all around. Padding of 8 pixels as well. There you go. That looks good. So that's looking pretty good to me. Let's come back and see what other differences there are. And what I see is the background seems to be unique to each one. So you can see that this last line has a background, and this middle line has a background, and this top line has a background. And there are ways to do this with what we call CSS3 gradients, but that's a little beyond your skill level. So I would recommend either stick with this, or if you have to do it, you can come here and to each line, you could wrap them within something like a span tag, and then you could apply the background transparency to each span tag. However, that's really hard when you're working with a dynamic website. So you would need to figure out the best way to do this. You could either use an image for the entire text and then use image replacement, which you've learned, or in our case, we're going to stick with this. I think it's fine for where you are at this point.